It has been 83 years since I died in this house. I remember the sound of the rain at night, hammering against the windows as thunder cracked through the sky. I was 13, scared, alone, and I had locked myself in the attic, hoping to hide from what I didn't understand. Mother had called me crazy. She said I was imagining the whispers. She slapped me when I told her the shadow spoke. But I know what I heard, what I saw. The attic, this attic, was the only place I felt safe, until it wasn't. The thing came in the storm. It wasn't wind that blew open the attic window. It was something darker, something cold. I felt it before I saw it, that weight pressing into the air, turning breath into frost. The room went silent. No rain, no thunder, only the soft creak of the wooden floor behind me. I didn't scream. It wouldn't have mattered. They never found me. Not truly. They thought I ran away. My parents searched for weeks, then gave up. They sealed the attic, nailed it shut. No one came up here for decades, and I stayed, alone, forgotten, but not gone. At first, I wandered the room, reached for my toys, sat at the window and watched the leaves change, the snowfall. I waited for someone to notice, for mother to call my name, for father to cry. But they moved on. I didn't. Then new people came, families, children. Laughter would echo through the halls, and I would listen, hiding behind the trunks and boxes. I wanted to speak, to be seen. But every time I tried, they would scream. One boy fainted when he saw me in the mirror. A woman moved out the same day after waking up with my name carved into the window pane. I never meant to scare them. I was just still here. Over time, I stopped trying. I faded, became the chill in the room, the whisper in the dark. I watched generation after generation fear me, call me evil, try to banish me. But how do you banish a child who simply never left? The last family that lived here had a girl, Lily. She reminded me of myself. She saw me once, truly saw me, and she smiled. You look sad, she said. I wept. She came up to the attic often after that, brought me her drawings, spoke to me about her school, her friends, her fears. I listened, and I felt something I hadn't in so long, warmth. But her parents didn't understand. They thought she had an imaginary friend. They moved away after she told them I cried at night. Now the house is empty again, dusty, quiet. I wait by the window, counting the cars that pass, wondering if someone else will come. I never left the attic. I don't know if I can. But maybe, just maybe, one day someone will come who isn't afraid. And maybe then, I can finally go home. It's funny, the way time folds in on itself when you're dead. The seasons blur together. Summer heat and winter frost feel the same when you no longer breathe. I watch the wallpaper peel and curl over the decades. I watch the ceiling crack. Watch spiders make homes where I once kept my books. The silence became a part of me. It sang lullabies I couldn't understand. Whispers that had nothing to do with the thing that took me, but that seemed to be drawn to my presence, like echoes of suffering reverberating through the timber. I think the house is alive, or maybe it became alive after I died. There are creaks and groans that don't belong to wood alone. Sometimes I hear something breathing beneath the floorboards. Sometimes it whispers my name. When Lily came, it changed. For a little while, it wasn't just a place of sorrow. She saw me, truly saw me, and I remembered who I was. I remembered my name, Sarah. I hadn't heard it in decades. I whispered it to myself again and again after she left, like a prayer. The house didn't like her. I think it was jealous. One night, I heard something moving below. It came up the stairs, slow, deliberate steps that didn't belong to any living soul. I stood between it and the attic door. For the first time in years, I was angry, protective. I screamed, not with voice, but with everything I was. And it stopped. It hasn't come back since. But I know it's still here, watching. Now, I sit in the same corner where I died. I don't remember how long it took. I remember being cold. I remember the shadows wrapping around me like vines. I remember my last breath, a soft exhale into silence. Sometimes I see myself, my old body reflected in the dusty mirror across the room. Pale, hollow-eyed. A child forever stuck in the moment she was abandoned. But I wait. Because I must. Because the house won't let me leave. Not yet. I think the house feeds on grief, on fear, on forgotten souls like mine. And I was its first. Maybe I gave it life. But Lily gave me hope. And that hope keeps me from becoming what the house wants. If you find this, if you hear me in the dark, don't run. Don't scream. Just speak. Say my name. Because I'm still here. And I never left the attic. And maybe, if you stay long enough to hear my story, to truly listen not with ears, but with your soul, you'll see the truth of this place. There are more like me now. Echoes. Shadows of sorrow, trapped in a cycle the house won't break. I speak to them, comfort them, try to help them remember who they were. Some don't want to remember. Some are angry, lost in the pain of how they died. But I still try, because that's what Lily did for me. Sometimes, late at night, I hear music, faint piano notes drifting from the parlor below. A memory, maybe, or someone else trying to hold on to what they were, and I hum along, even if the tune has long been forgotten by the living. I think the attic is a boundary, not just of space, but of time. Everything comes here eventually. Memories, regrets, spirits. The house holds them all like pages in a book no one reads. But if you're reading this now, then you've opened that book. You've stepped inside my story. So listen closely. If you feel the cold, if you hear the whispers, don't be afraid. Say my name, because I am still here, and I never left the attic. After Lily left, the house was no longer the same. The warmth she brought seemed to evaporate the moment she walked out the front door. The once faint chill that had lingered in the attic grew colder, seeping into every crack and crevice like an icy breath. The silence, which had been my only companion, turned oppressive, heavy, and suffocating. Like a thick fog settling over my very soul, I was trapped, still confined to the attic, a prisoner of this decaying house and the shadows it harbored. Days, or perhaps years, I had lost count passed without a single visitor. The laughter and footsteps of the new families had ceased, leaving only the sound of the wind rattling broken window panes and the occasional scuttle of unseen creatures in the dark corners. But beneath the quiet, I felt something stirring. It was subtle at first, a faint murmur beneath the floorboards, barely audible, a soft sigh slipping through the cracks in the walls, a shadow moving just beyond my sight. Then, gradually, the whispers grew louder and sharper. Voices spoke in hushed tones, whispers laced with sadness, anger, and longing. They called my name, beckoned me deeper into the darkness. "You don't belong here," one voice hissed, cold and cruel, slicing through the silence. "You're trapped, forgotten, just like us." I wanted to answer, to scream, to demand why I was still here, but I had no voice, only the silent echoes of a restless spirit. The attic felt alive with these whispers, as if the house itself was breathing, pulsating with a dark energy that fed on despair and fear. One night, during a storm that rattled the house to its bones, I saw her again, Lily, or at least, a version of her. She stood at the foot of the attic stairs, her figure bathed in the flickering light of the lightning outside. But something was wrong. Her eyes were vacant, lifeless, and her smile twisted into something unnatural. She whispered my name, but it wasn't really her voice, it was the shadow speaking through her, a cruel mockery of the girl who had once brought me hope. I reached out, desperate to pull her back from the darkness that had claimed her, but my hands passed through her like smoke. She dissolved into the swirling shadows, and with her went the last flicker of light I had ever known. The attic grew colder still, the darkness thicker. The whispers multiplied, filling the room with the voices of the lost children, like me, trapped in endless torment, their souls tethered to this house. I realized then that I was not alone. The house was a prison for the forgotten, a cage where shadows fed on the sorrow of the trapped. The truth came crashing down on me. This house was not just wood and nails. It was alive, a living entity that thrived on grief and fear, binding us all with invisible chains forged from despair. I was its first victim, the first soul it ensnared. But unlike the others, I remembered who I was. I remembered my name, Sarah, and I refused to let the darkness claim me entirely. Gathering every ounce of will and memory, I began to fight back, not with screams or rage, but with the light of my past. I recalled the warmth of sunlight on my face, the sound of laughter, the kindness Lily showed me. I sent out whispers of hope, soft and gentle like a lullaby, to the other lost souls trapped in the walls. I told them they were not alone, that we could resist, that we could be free. The house trembled at my defiance. It lashed out with cold drafts and rattling chains, trying to silence me, to drag me deeper into the shadows. But I held firm. I would not give up. I would not let it win. Sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night, I would see flickers of light, tiny sparks of resistance emanating from the other trapped souls. Together, we formed a fragile flicker in the overwhelming darkness. And still, I wait. I wait for the next light to enter the attic, for the next soul brave enough to see me, for the next chance at freedom. because I never left the attic. But I am still fighting to leave. Time has a strange way of bending here, in the heart of the house. Days bleed into nights, and years fold into moments. I have long since lost the count of how long I have lingered in this attic prison, but something has changed. A new prison stirs the stay of air, something alive, something different. It began subtly, with a faint vibration in the wooden floorboards, almost like a heartbeat syncing with my own restless spirit. The whispers, once cruel and menacing, started to shift. They softened, hesitated, as if uncertain whether to welcome or warn. And then, one evening, when the moon hung low and full in the sky, I sensed footsteps ascending the creaking staircase. Her name was Emma. She was not like the others, where previous visitors ran screaming or fainted. Emma climbed the attic stairs with steady resolve. She carried a small lantern, its warm glow casting trembling shadows that danced on the faded wallpaper. Her eyes, wide and curious, held no fear, only wonder. When she looked at me, really looked, I felt something stir deep within my hollow chest. For the first time in decades, a connection bridged the divide between life and death. I wanted to speak, to tell her my story, to plead for rescue, but the words caught in the silence. Emma didn't need me to speak. She reached out, her hand passing through mine, but filled with a warmth I had not felt in years. Her voice was soft, yet clear as a bell in the stillness. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not afraid." Those words were a beacon, igniting a flame of hope within the cold gloom. Emma returned night after night. She brought with her old photographs, letters, and books, traces of lives that had touched this house long ago. She spoke to me of the outside world, of sunlight and laughter, of seasons changing and life moving on. I shared with her my memories, faint and fragmented, but precious nonetheless. Together, we began to unravel the house's secrets. It was not just a prison for lost souls. It was a sentinel guarding a terrible past. The house was built on cursed land, where tragedy had struck generations before my death. Stories of despair, betrayal, and violence were etched into every beam and floorboard. The shadows were not just restless spirits, they were echoes of those tragedies, trapped in endless torment, yearning for release. One night, Emma found an old journal hidden beneath the attic floorboards. Its pages told the story of a man named Jeremiah Blackwood, the original owner of the house. A man obsessed with immortality. He had dabbled in dark rituals, binding souls to his estate to prolong his own existence. The realization hit like a thunderclap. Jeremiah's curse was the source of the house's torment. His dark magic held us captive, feeding on our suffering to sustain his unnatural life. Emma vowed to help me break the curse. With each visit, she grew stronger, her presence pushing back against the oppressive darkness. She carried symbols of light, candles, crystals, and prayers whispered in forgotten tongues. We fought the shadows together, pushing them back step by step. But the house did not surrender easily. It unleashed its fury. Walls groaned, floors shook, and shadows writhed like living things. One night, I felt a cold hand grip my wrist, dragging me towards a swirling vortex of darkness. Panic surged through me, but Emma's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold on, Sarah. We're almost free." Her hand found mine, and with a blinding flash, the darkness shattered. The attic flooded with light, the pure golden light of dawn breaking through the grim night. For the first time in nearly a century, I felt warmth flood my being. The chains binding me loosened, the shadows recoiling in defeat. The house trembled, then fell silent, as if exhausted by the battle. Emma smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. But as the first rays of sunlight spilled into the attic, I hesitated. Freedom was within reach, yet a part of me clung to this place, the house that had been both prison and home. I was no longer the frightened child who had hidden here all those years ago. I was something more, an echo of hope, a guardian for the souls still trapped. As Emma descended the stairs, promising to return, I made a silent vow. I would remain a watchful spirit in this house, a protector of those lost in the shadows, until every soul found its dawn, because I never left the attic. And now, I would make sure no one else was lost to its darkness. After that dawn, after the house seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, something changed, not just in me, but in the very walls themselves. The oppressive weight of centuries seemed to lift, but the silence that followed was not peace. It was the calm before a storm. Emma kept her promise and returned. Every week she came back, bringing light, hope, and most importantly, company. For the first time since my death, I felt less alone. But the house, ancient and cunning, was far from defeated. It hid secrets deeper than any journal or ritual could reveal.
One evening, Emma brought with her a historian named Daniel, someone who had spent years studying the darker chapters of this region's past.
Together, they began digging through archives, newspapers, and old court records, piecing together the twisted history of the land and the Blackwood family.
I watched silently, invisible yet tethered to every discovery.
What they uncovered chilled me more than the coldest winter night. Jeremiah Blackwood was not merely a sorcerer obsessed with immortality. He was a man who had sacrificed everything, including his family, to bind his soul to the house.
His obsession birthed a curse that entwined not just the living and the dead, but time itself.
The house was a vortex where past and present collided, and some souls were trapped forever in endless loops of pain and despair.
As Daniel read aloud from an old trial transcript, I remembered.
The screams, the fire, the final night when I was locked away in the attic, abandoned to a fate I never understood.
The house had been my prison, my sanctuary, and my torment.
Emma and Daniel devised a plan to break the curse completely, but it required a sacrifice, something more powerful than candles or prayers. They needed me. I was the first spirit bound to this place, the one Jeremiah had tethered with his darkest magic. If I could confront the heart of the curse, face Jeremiah's lingering spirit, perhaps the cycle could finally be broken. One stormy night, much like the one when I died, Emma and Daniel led me through the house. The air grew thick, the shadows darker, whispering threats and warnings. At the basement door, they hesitated. "This is where it all began," Daniel said. I descended the stairs into the damp, cold darkness, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on me.
There, in the bowels of the house, I saw him, Jeremiah Blackwood's spirit, a twisted shadow of a man, trapped between worlds.
He spoke without moving his lips, voice like the grinding of stone.
"You think you can undo what I have done?
You are bound here as I am."
"I don't want to be bound," I replied, gathering every ounce of strength. A battle of wills ensued, not with fists, but with memories, pain, and regrets laid bare.
I showed him my loneliness, my sorrow, and the centuries of suffering he caused.
Slowly, his spirit faltered. The house trembled violently as the curse began to unravel, the walls cracking, light pouring in from unseen cracks.
Shadows screamed as they were freed, drifting upwards like smoke on the wind. In that moment, I felt the chains binding me snap.
But freedom was bittersweet. I realized that while Jeremiah's curse was broken, the house would always hold a piece of me. I was part of its story, and it was part of mine.
Emma and Daniel helped me find peace that night. They performed the final rites, welcoming me into the light. And yet, as I faded from the attic for the first time in nearly a century, I whispered a promise to those who might come after. I will watch over this house, not as a prisoner, but as its guardian.
So no one else suffers as I did.
The attic, once a place of fear and sorrow, became a sanctuary of memory and hope.
Because sometimes the darkest shadows can teach us to find the brightest light. Though I had finally broken free from the chains that bound me to the house, I soon realized that true freedom was more complicated than I ever imagined. The attic no longer felt like a prison, but it remained my home, a place where the echoes of the past lingered, and the fragile line between the living and the dead blurred.
Emma and Daniel left the house after their work was done, but their visits didn't end. They sent letters, photographs of new families who had moved in, and stories of strange happenings that reminded me the house was far from ordinary. Sometimes at night, I would drift through the walls, sensing the joy or fear of those inside.
I watched children play, their laughter like music I hadn't heard in decades, but I also felt the cold grip of sorrow when pain or loss crept in.
The house absorbed everything: memories, hopes, fears, and I was its silent guardian, protecting those who crossed its threshold.
One autumn evening, a new family arrived, the Carters.
They were unaware of the house's dark history, drawn instead by its charm and the promise of a fresh start.
A little boy named Max fascinated me the most.
He was curious and brave, unafraid of the shadows, and somehow, I sensed he could see me too.
Max's innocence broke through the lingering darkness.
He spoke to me softly, sharing secrets and dreams.
He wasn't scared. He was my first true friend in over 80 years.
But not everything was peaceful.
The house had scars, places where Jeremiah's curse still whispered faintly in the walls.
One night, Max's room grew cold, and the shadows twisted unnaturally.
I felt an old presence stirring, a fragment of darkness refusing to fade. I rushed to Max's side, shielding him from the unseen threat.
The air thickened, and a chilling voice hissed promises of despair.
But I stood firm, a guardian spirit no longer bound by fear.
With Max's courage beside me, the darkness recoiled.
The Carters soon realized the house was special, not haunted, but alive in ways they couldn't explain. They respected its history and treated it with kindness, and for the first time, the house seemed to smile.
My existence had changed.
No longer a forgotten ghost, I was a protector, a watcher, a guardian who ensured the house remained a place of safety.
As the years passed, the attic grew warmer, filled with light and memories of hope.
I learned that sometimes, to find peace, you must embrace your past, face your fears, and open your heart to those who need you most.
And so, I stay not trapped, but chosen, because the house is not just wood and stone. It's a living story, and I am its guardian, forever watching from the attic where I once feared to stay, now proud to call home. If you ever find yourself in this house, listen closely.
You might hear a whisper, gentle and kind, reminding you that you are never truly alone.
It began with the smell, musty, damp, like the scent of earth disturbed after decades of silence.
I first noticed it during the quiet hours, the time between night and dawn, when the house slumbered and even the wind seemed to hold its breath.
The Carter family was still asleep, Max nestled safely in his bed, and I stood watch as always, until I felt it, a shiver in the air.
A memory I didn't own.
Beneath the floorboards, it was faint at first, just a sense that something moved down there, deeper than the basement, deeper than the stone foundation. Something buried, or worse, waiting. I pressed my hand to the old attic floor, and for the briefest moment, it felt warm.
That was not normal. I had spent decades feeling the icy stillness of that attic.
For it to feel alive meant something else had awakened. Over the next few nights, I watched more closely. The walls groaned louder, shadows stretched longer, and in the basement, a small crack opened in the floor where there was once solid concrete.
Max heard it too.
He whispered to me one night, sitting cross-legged in his room, "There's someone under the house."
I hear them calling when I close my eyes.
I begged him not to listen.
Because I finally remembered something I had tried to forget. The thing that took me that night, 83 years ago, had not truly been gone.
It had gone deeper.
The house had trapped it, sealed it beneath.
Not to protect us,
but to feed it.
I began exploring the house more thoroughly than ever before. I drifted through walls, slipped into the cracks of the foundation, and reached places no one living had touched in over a century.
And there, buried in the earth, I found remnants. Bones, trinkets, rusted tools, offerings, perhaps.
Or sacrifices. The house had grown on that soil, drank from its pain. But now, something was shifting. The foundation was weakening. The seal was failing.
I felt it clawing upward. It wanted the boy. I had no voice, not like the living. I couldn't shout,
but I could push.
I could warn. That night, I shook Max's bed.
I rattled the windows. I lit every bulb in the attic until sparks burst from the sockets.
His parents were terrified.
They called in a priest, a medium, even a psychic from a reality show.
None of them understood. They focused on me, tried to cleanse me, as if I were the threat.
And all the while, the floor beneath them breathed.
It wasn't until Max vanished that they believed.
He disappeared from his room. No signs of entry or struggle, just a cold wind, and his name carved into the floorboards, not by my hand. By its, I followed the trail. Through the walls, into the basement, through the crack in the concrete.
And there, in the blackness below the foundation, I saw it, an ancient hollow older than the house.
A nest of bones. And in the center, Max unconscious, cradled by tendrils of shadow.
The thing had grown.
Not just a spirit, but a hunger-given form. It saw me and remembered, the child it once claimed, the girl who never left.
But I was no longer its prey. I was the guardian now. I called on everything I had, every flicker of light, every echo of warmth Lily had given me, every memory of laughter and love I'd stored in the attic.
And I pushed, not with rage, but with defiance. With grace, the shadows screamed.
The earth shook.
And for the first time, the house itself fought back. Walls cracked, the attic windows shattered. A great sigh rippled through the wood and nails as if the house was exhaling a century of buried guilt. I poured Max into my arms, or what was left of them, and together we rose.
When he awoke in his room, gasping, his parents wept.
They packed and left by morning. They never looked back.
And I remained, shaken, but stronger, because now I know the attic isn't just mine anymore.
The house knows me.
and whatever else waits below. It also knows one more thing: I will never leave.
And I will never stop fighting for the light.